Welcome to the 2021 Virtual Central Kentucky Legislative Day presented by Charter Communications. Thank you for joining business and community leaders from across Central Kentucky, the region, for today's event. And like many aspects of our work lives, advocacy in Frankfort looks very different. We look forward to connecting with key legislative leaders to get the latest information on what's happening in Frankfort and to discuss some of the priorities that we have here in the Central Kentucky region. For the business community, many priorities are focused on protecting jobs and economic recovery. Some of the key issues are listed in the booklet you received via email or at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Just click on chat and you will see there different information that we'll be putting on from time to time to connect you to sources of good information. And also you can leave messages as well. So we'll be highlighting some of your points that you put on that chat room as we go forward with our different speakers. We appreciate all the sponsors of today's event, our platinum sponsor, Baptist Health, our gold sponsor, AT&T, and our presenting sponsor, Charter Communications. Now I'd like to welcome Jason Keller, Vice President of Government Affairs for Charter Communications, to the podium for presenting sponsor remarks and the introduction of our first speaker. Jason.
Well, thank you, Bob. I'm here at the virtual podium, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the hundreds of Charter Communications employees who call Central Kentucky home, thank you for being part of Central Kentucky Day. These types of events, as Bob just noted, have become commonplace during the pandemic, as have our classrooms, workplaces, and social interactions. Fortunately, the vast majority of Kentuckians have access to a reliable internet connection to make our virtual lives possible, and our company is proud to play a big part in that. But there are still far too many families who don't have access to service, and our commitment is to connect those families and bridge the digital divide. In a place like Lexington and other Central Kentucky communities, where we offer gigabit internet speeds to the vast majority of households, we're working to connect families through programs like our low-cost service, Spectrum Internet Assist, and our newly launched affordable housing program. And we also strongly support the bipartisan emergency broadband benefits program created by Congress in December to help low-income families access the internet. But in many of Kentucky's rural areas, some of which don't have the infrastructure that has been built in Lexington and other Central Kentucky communities, we have to do more to expand broadband to those that need it. And that's why we were proud to recently announce that Charter was awarded $58 million in federal funding to build broadband to nearly 32,000 households in Kentucky that don't have internet access. And this will be one of the largest last mile broadband projects in Kentucky history and will dramatically impact communities across the Bluegrass region. Of our total award, more than $9 million will be invested in Central Kentucky communities to expand broadband to homes that don't have it. And just an example of that are more than 1,400 homes in Boyle County, more than 2,400 homes in Clark County, more than 200 in Fayette County, and more than 1,000 in Madison County. These Central Kentucky families desperately need fast, reliable broadband service. And we're proud to soon bring broadband to them and ensure they have the connections they need. Our more than 3,100 Kentucky employees are working every day to connect families and businesses across the Commonwealth. We're proud to work with policymakers at the state and local level to ensure an environment that fosters economic development and helps to close the digital divide. And no one in Kentucky is more focused on achieving that goal than our first guest. Senate President Robert Stivers has demonstrated over and over his focus on expanding opportunities for Kentuckians and ensuring businesses across the state are well positioned to thrive and succeed. Senator Stivers, thank you so much for joining us for Central Kentucky Day.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate being here on a cold, snowy morning. As you see me, I want to think that it was either Amy Wycliffe or Kate Shanks described me as having my LL Bean look, while David Osborne will come with his GQ look a little bit later. But this is what I wear when I'm being a little more casual. Hopefully no one minds too bad. Appreciate Bob that the Lexington Commerce is putting this on, an opportunity to kind of get a few comments out and then take questions. But let me briefly go through this. As it was talked about earlier by Bob, this session is not like any other session. This is my 25th year. Between the weather and COVID, it's been extremely difficult to get any type of rhythm going. So we've started. Today I'm here, but I'm one of the few that's here in Frankfurt because of the weather. The COVID situation and trying to deal with it with our committees, virtual testimony has made it difficult, trying to make sure our members are taken care of, our 500 staff members are taken care of, and those few people who actually do get to come here on rare occasions, that they're not exposed to anything. So it's been difficult logistically this year dealing with all this. The primary things I think I want to get into real quickly is as we go forward and we go through the last month and the last 15 days of the session, we're going to be focused on the budget. We've been discussing the budget, both the road budget and the general fund budget extensively, but as I've said earlier, it's been difficult getting any type of consistency or momentum because the start again type of atmosphere we've been in because of things well beyond our control. I think we're going to have a strong budget, a conservative budget. The governor wanted to do several things, and this is not in any way directed at the governor. We have different philosophies, and I tell people all the time, it's nothing personal. You don't always get along with your wife when you're trying to, or your spouse, when you're trying to budget. You don't always agree with your children when you're budgeting, but you still don't kick them out of the house because you don't agree. So we're probably going to have some different ways of doing some things, but primarily focused on how we deal with the unemployment insurance and start to replenish that so we don't get additional assessments that our businesses can't handle. We also want to look at maybe doing something different than the governor proposed on the way to get money back in. We really have had a lot of discussions about coupling with the federal tax so individual companies can look at deductibility of expenses as it relates to PPP loans. So we think that would be broad-based and help all businesses, not picking and choosing those two instances of UI, and the deductibility would be across the board types of situations that would be good for each and every business that we talk about. We still have to cost it out and see what it's going to do to our overall budget. We're in a good position, and I will give the governor credit and his group, John Hicks, understanding what was coming down. They did a good job managing the budget, doing some scoops and dumps and supplanting one-time dollars for recurring dollars, which gives us a really strong rainy day fund. But what we want to make sure we don't do when we're in such an uncertain time is that we go out and start spending things when we don't know how our economy is going to react, especially concerning the realities that we're getting variants of the COVID vaccine. Plus, we've had problems in this state and all states getting the distribution and getting the shots. So when you think about our economy is really dependent on getting shots in arms and masks off people's faces in a safe manner, and then throw into that getting daycare and kids back in school. And we are in such uncertain times that we want to be probably a lot more conservative about what we do. Will we finish with strong budget reserve? Yes, we will, or a rainy day fund. But I think that's prudent in this time, especially considering that we'll be back in less than a year. Let's just maintain the course and see how the economy comes back, how these shots get distributed. Are the variants going to play any role in sidetracking us? So with that, just a couple of other things. Jason, you mentioned this. One of the things we have learned and one of the things we are seeing that broadband is so important to today's society, be it just communications between family members, be it business meetings, which we're an example of today, the educational impacts that it's going to have, the telemedicine and the opportunities with it. So I think the issue outside of just the general fiscal issues are what to do with the broadband. I think the governor has proposed some things. I think we're all in agreement. We need to go there and go that direction. It's to the extent and amounts that we want to put into expanding last mile broadband and upgrading the systems that we currently have through either for-profits or rural telephones, rural co-ops. Hopefully there will be some further discussion on that about how we truly best serve all Kentuckians in this unusual time. Lastly, I think the other prudent comment to discuss, and that we've had lots of discussion, is the educational components of our society. We know that many people, for two purposes, rely on the educational system. One, to educate their children and educate the workforce, the up and coming workforce, but two, for consistency purposes and the realities of daycare. It functions while mom and dad are out working as the alternative to daycare. So it's critically important that we get our school systems back up and running. And for those children who aren't in school, get our daycares back, because that's a critical component of our business community. And last, I'll finish with this. It has been our discussions, and you can ask me about this. You can probably ask David Osborne, the speaker, about this. We are very focused on what happens to the business community, because if we don't get our business environment, the dynamics back in shape to where people are working, money is being churned in the system, there's a certain velocity in that money, allowing it to turn over and move from place to place. When you think about the state collecting taxes for income tax, sales tax, corporate tax, if we're not generating those, we're not paying our school teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, and our social workers. So we've got to restore our economy, because the sole and singular reason that we are in a good financial position right now is because the federal government has pumped so much into the economy that we are just artificially inflated in our receipts, and that can't go on. So with that, that's just kind of a quick overview. Bob or Jason, whoever, I would gladly take any questions.
President Stivers, this is Bob Quick. I do have a couple other questions, but I will say this, you really hit on many of the issues, and you are very much in tune with business and our needs, our concerns. You touched on a number of points in the at the midpoint here where you're at, where you see issues the Senate would be moving forward, but one that I want to in particular make strong mention at the very beginning is your support of the Senate Bill 120, the historical horse racing bill. We dodged a huge bullet, and for not just the equine industry, but the state. That was a very significant work in leadership, and you and many others stepped out, and I just want to say thank you very much for doing that.
Well, Bob, I appreciate that. I don't think it's a good thing to build our economy on this type of situation using a mixed bag of games that are part skill, part chance. But it's become so entwined, so rooted into the horse racing industry. And that's what convinced me, independently looking at what the horse racing industry had done nationally and internationally, had seen how it had been shrinking, collapsing. But the horse racing industry in Kentucky has actually remained strong and expanding, even though worldwide and nationwide it was weakening or contracting. And that was specifically because of HHRs. So if we had not done that, and I got a lot of criticism, and I understand, because, again, economics and things of that nature, I don't really think it's a good play. But in this situation, we had to do it, because would it have ruined the horse industry? No, it wouldn't have. But boy, would it have seriously hurt it. And so I stepped up and got involved.
Well, thank you. So noted, and I can tell you it was much talked about in the circles that we run. Another very significant issue, if you could update us on the status of Senate Bill 5, the COVID-19 liability protections, and what are the key components and where does it stand in the process? And then following up with how can the business community help pass this legislation?
Well, Senate Bill 5 came out of committee. There were a few suggestions in committee that we're going to take some floor amendments on, if people were watching, more particularly related to statute of limitations on property damage, which is not a really big worry. But overall, it's premise liability. Everybody was trying to operate under various guidances from World Health Organization, CDC, Governor's Office, the Coronavirus Task Force, and they were changing quickly, almost daily, if not hourly. It seems sometimes. So we want to make sure that again, in the realm and in the vein of UI and the taxes and liability issues, that we want to make sure that businesses can open up and not fear litigation when they've done their best to comply with all the guidances that came down. And then there were certain essential groups that were basically brought under the umbrella of the sovereign. And so when you think about them, that, and I'm going to give you a good example of this. My son's out and he's already worked over 40 hours this week. Wage and hour guidelines go out the door when you're in a storm and you're a master lineman and a substation tech. So from Monday until last night, he'd already put in over 40 hours because you had to get power back on. So things happen when you're tired, but you have to get the job done. And sometimes you have to make certain leniencies and have certain in your conduct to make sure it does get done. And certain protections for those people who are working, that in normal circumstances, people would say, well, why are you working 40 hours in 3 days? Well, you have to. That's similar to what went on here with the pandemic, that things had to get done and you had to take certain risks. And we want to make sure that those people, if something happened and they were in a reasonable manner related to the pandemic and what their essential status was, that they're protected as well.
Well, we know you have put a lot of work into this for some time, and we've been monitoring that, following that. And one of the follow-ups here would be just from the business community standpoint, how can we help you kind of get this here towards the end of the session passed?
Well, Bob, I'm going to say this. The business community could be really helpful, the education community, because it applies to schools. Yep. It's one thing, and y'all have a great group of lobbyists. I've known Andy for years. She worked with us. But it's another thing when the store owner in Chevy Chase calls their legislator. It's another thing when my school superintendent calls me from Corbett. When the head of and workers from Toyota or Big Ass Fans, take your choice. Store owners in Fayette Mall, actually get on the phone and call people. Lobbyists are good and they help us and they've got a key role and critical function, but it's not your hometown people reaching out to you saying this needs to be done. And that's the biggest thing that anybody could do, is have these businesses, have these store owners, have these grocery store owners, clothing store owners, get on that phone, send a message saying, we want this to get passed.
Well said. Well said. Is there a support in the Senate for passing a transportation funding bill that increases the gas tax?
Well, we have started with that. There are individuals who have expressed some support. And I want to say this, I'm hesitant. I don't want to give anybody any misunderstandings or misimpressions. I'm very much for changing the way we fund our road system. And that's just not talking about the gas tax. If you, I was shocked, and I sent this out. The guy that did the Super Bowl commercial about electronic vehicles, we have nothing that assesses any type of usage tax on electronic vehicles. And that's going to be the mushrooming market. And we saw it on a Super Bowl commercial talking about, what was it, Norway or Denmark or Sweden or something like that. It's just not a look at what a gas tax is, because it doesn't matter what our gas tax is in 2035, which people say, well, that's 14 years from now. Well, that's going to get here quicker, but that market is ever expanding. And now Elon Musk, I think, because of his technology, is the second wealthiest person in the world, even though his automobile manufacturing process is small compared to the big boys. So it's a holistic approach, and it's a lot more complex than just saying increase this by a nickel or a dime, because if you're not going to have cars that are driving on gasoline, what does it matter what the rate is?
I know in our region we have a lot of issues, infrastructure issues that we need help with, and oftentimes the issue we run into is the lack of funding, but also staring at us are two huge bridges. The one in northern Kentucky, which controls a huge part of the nation's GDP, but also ours. It's amazing what crosses that on a daily basis. But also the I-69 bridge. And a lot of people here in central Kentucky don't always equate those two bridges, maybe more the Brent Spence Bridge than the I-69 bridge. But with our suppliers in the automotive industry and others, they're both very important to us. So we keep trying to broaden the understanding of our folks. But again, thank you for focusing on this issue. I know we're going to be hearing from some folks a little bit later, talk a little bit more about it. But that's another significant issue to us. You talked about on the budget a number of things, the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. You talked about increasing investments, or how you make investments and how you work with education. The in-person is huge for us. You talked about the daycare workers. Those things I just want to emphasize, spot on with us. And then the Broadband Incentive Fund. I mean, we have learned it this past year of either how naked we can be as a region or how advanced by the internet. Any final thoughts here as we wrap up our few minutes with you?
Well, I'm going to say this about the internet. The internet is a blanket issue for the state. Now, you may have coal that's in the east, or the lakes in south central Kentucky. You've got, but the internet is something that applies everywhere. And to be competitive in this day and age, and to also see expansion in the rural areas, because it's amazing. People calling up to, and I'm going to say in Jackson County and Alzette County, some of the most rural areas, even in Clay County, saying, do y'all have good internet? And if you've got good internet, we're interested in coming there because we want to get to a little slower pace. And all we need is good internet to do our business. And good friend of mine and called me and said we'd sold, I'm saying we, the county, people in the county had sold 5 pieces of properties to people sight unseen based on the assertion that we had good internet, because they wanted to get out of the hectic life of the city. And one gentleman said he was paying $18,000 a year in property taxes on his condo in Chicago. And he said, I can do everything I want if I have good internet, being in rural parts of Kentucky, and I'm only an hour away from the Lexington Fayette Bluegrass Airport. And that's all I need, because I have to fly 3 times a month. Yeah. And so that's how critical this internet broadband issue is right now to me. So I think that's going to be one of our biggest topics. And I think that's where we and the governor probably agree about the need. It's just how we do it in the best way.
Yes, and I can tell you a lot of people know Fayette County and a few other counties here have much better high-speed capacity for but out in the rural areas, we still struggle. And then out in other counties where, like I said, we're pretty bare as far as that infrastructure piece. But I think you said it very well. President Stivers, we appreciate you. A lot of people don't get to see the behind the scenes work that you and others put in. It's always assumed, but more than anything else, when you talked about helping get the business community back up and running, we know you get it, and you get it well, and you have been for, I think you said 25 years been doing this, but we really appreciate the time. And I am envious of the dress code that I thought about it, and then I thought, somebody will put on a suit, and okay, well, I should have. But anyway, thank you very much.
I've got the LL Bean look today. David Osborne will come with the GQ look. So,
thank you very much. Glad to have you this morning, and be safe.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of you out there, one of the most important things that I think we do is we connect you with the key leaders that we have in our government, whether it be local, state, federal. And so today, as we take that look and talk with key leaders, we're going to get that inside understanding of where things are and where they need to be. So I would also say, as time goes forward, never hesitate to reach out to your elected representative, whether in the House or Senate. Let them know where you feel, where you are on issues. I think this Senate President made a very good point that they need to hear from the grassroots, and they need to hear from you. And if they don't, it doesn't help their case in trying to do the right things for us. So one of the things that you're going to see that you should have received in an email, also you'll see on this Zoom, is our handout, and in that some really good information that I just want to point out to you. These are back in the in-person days, which we all kind of crave for and look forward to, but typically this day is packed with a lot of faces very familiar to us. But also throughout all this, you'll see who's involved in our different, whether it be Fayette County or our regional public policy initiatives, some of the issues we're dealing with, and also you'll find on the back our policy over lunch, which is going to focus on the vaccination distribution coming up, and we've got some key leaders that'll help do that. And of course, our sponsors. Without them, we would be in trouble. So I want to just emphasize that that's in front of you. As well, one of our newsletters that you would have received had all of our public policy statements, and they are written up so that people can understand them. They're not full page, multiple page write-ups here. They're more in briefs so that, again, you can see what we have been listening to from you, our member, and then how we can keep these issues out in front of the legislators. But you need to be very aware of them as we go forward and help us to make the sale on them. All right, we have with us House Speaker David Osborne. How are you, sir? Oh, it looks you're muted.
Apparently I was well, but not unmuted. I apologize.
There you go. Good to see you. And now are you
as well? Thank you.
Are you in Frankfurt? Are you back home? Where are you right now?
I'm in my home office today.
All right. Well, hopefully you didn't get the brunt of what we got last night or this past week, but I have a feeling you probably did. But hopefully you've been safe, and Western Kentucky is in a much better position.
We got a little snow last night, probably 2 or 3 inches. Nothing in comparison to what a lot of places got. And as I continue to say, there's lots of me that wants to continue to complain about so many things that we're going through these days. But when I look at the struggles that some people are having across the Commonwealth, I'm blessed. So I want to be mindful of that.
I hear you. Well, I know our time is very limited. You got a very busy schedule today. So let me just ask you a few questions, or if you would like to make a few introductory comments, or I'll just go right into.
No, please do.
Okay.
These virtual formats are sometimes painful to listen to for those on that end, and they're difficult for us to deliver on our end. So I always think that questions are better for these formats.
Well, we're at the midpoint in the legislative days. What issues do you expect to advance in the House in the remaining days?
Obviously, the thing that will take the forefront of everything we do from now on out is going to be the budget. Um, as Robert Stivers always says, the budget is the ultimate policy document. It is what defines where we will go for the next now year and a half. Anyway, it's extremely difficult to do one in a short session. It's usually difficult to do one in a long session. But understanding that we have to do one in a short session is difficult, but it is one that we will do. Um, it is also one that is surrounded by a tremendous amount of uncertainty. I think that everybody's somewhat pleased that, or not somewhat, is very pleased that our revenue numbers have not dropped more than they have. I also believe that the consensus forecasting group has done an outstanding job. These are consummate professionals that do very, very good work. At the same time, I think that even one of the economists on the consensus forecasting group said that it was somewhat akin to throwing darts at a dartboard. And so while we are encouraged by our revenues, I think that we are still somewhat suspicious of those revenues and know that when we look at the reality of our economy, well, I believe the underlying economy remains strong. Um, from the past several years of very, very expansive growth. We also know that right now we've only regained about 65% of the jobs that we lost during the pandemic. We have lost thousands of businesses. And investment in Kentucky businesses has gone from over $5 billion to in 2019 to about 1.5 billion in the most recent years. So it's difficult to have any great confidence that that our economy is sustainable under those circumstances. So I think that the budget that we will pass is one that will be very, very conservative. And I know that's going to be disappointing to some because they will see, pots of money that are sitting there that we may put in the rainy day fund. Granted, our rainy day fund is strong. It's about $450 million right now. But at the same time, that's only about 3 or 4 days of operating expenses for the Commonwealth. So we have to be mindful of that. And I think that we will be as cautious and conservative as we can, yet at the same time making strategic investments in places where we truly can make a difference and where we can utilize some one-time money in some one-time circumstances.
So the first item, the first issue I want to bring up to it's it's going to be to say thank you very much. It was Senate Bill 120, the historical horse racing bill. Here in Central Kentucky, as you would guess, that was a huge priority for us. There was a lot of concern, and I want to tell you, it took a lot of leadership from many people, and yourself included, to make that happen. We just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you. It was a big lift. I'm not going to deny that. It was, as you all know, the gaming issue is always a divisive issue. It's one that people have very, very strong passions and emotions about, and justifiably so. But it's also one in this potential case. We've always been able to look at the gambling issue a little bit in a vacuum of what could happen, what could we gain by passing it. And in this particular case, it's what would we lose. And we knew that there were thousands of jobs at stake and countless billions of dollars of economic activity that would be lost. Those are not without consequence, and those are very, very real consequences. What would have happened had we not acted? At the end of the day, that argument won out. But it is one that, again, was very difficult. It was a team effort. I give an incredible amount of credit to Representative Matt Cook, Adam Koenig, Senator Schickel. It was a team effort, and it was, I believe, a very positive piece of legislation.
Well, we're going to be hearing from Mr. Cook here in a little bit and talk more with him. But again, thank you. We feel like here we dodged a big bullet, but also we solidified our position here globally with this legislation. We support meaningful COVID-19 liability protections. I know the House passed House Bill 10, the Senate passed Senate Bill 5. Will passage of a compromise liability protections bill be a priority before the end of the session?
It is absolutely a priority. We knew that there were some current concerns over House Bill 10 when we passed it. We felt like it was important, however, to go ahead and send that signal the first week we were in session, that was one of our absolute top priorities. We've continued to work with the Senate as they have passed Senate Bill 5. These are two very, very different approaches, both aimed at accomplishing the same thing, and that is to give businesses the confidence that they need, that they won't be targeted if they've operated in a responsible manner that has taken into consideration prudent recommendations that have been handed down by government entities. Obviously, we're not looking to alleviate someone from willful negligence. That's never the intent. But for people that have operated responsibly, we've got to give them the assurance that they will not be targeted. And that is driving a significant amount of behavior right now. I get calls every day of people that are contemplating reopening, contemplating closing. And one of the very real considerations as they make those decisions is the potential for liability.
Very well stated. And I can tell you that's one of the issues we hear daily, a concern about. And again, you're right. If somebody has been abusive and has not been a good player, absolutely. That's what the court system here is all about, and the legal system. But just like PPP, being able to expense out deductibility, a lot of folks, that PPP money has been something that they are very much in need of. And so not being able to deduct those expenses, I know, is another big concern that we tend to hear in this room too. Do you think much will happen on that issue?
Yes, we will remedy that situation. There's two different possibilities. There is a bill, I want to say it's House Bill 298. Patrick Flannery is the sponsor of that bill that directly tackles the issue. We will also include language in the revenue bill when we send it over to the Senate with the budget. And include that language there to make sure that those expenses are deductible.
Okay, thank you. Is there support in the House for passing a transportation funding bill that would increase the gas tax?
Yes. And I think that when I say support, I think that there's a general understanding of the need for adequate funding for infrastructure. I do think that there's some concern about the long-term viability of our funding plan and funding method. Everybody understands that motor fuels is a declining resource as far as revenue goes. And to continue to rely on that, I think that there's an understanding that we have to do something to shore up our road fund. But also an understanding that anything that we do is a short-term fix, because I've seen projections that I think it was General Motors hopes to phase out combustion engines by 2035, and that's where the bulk of our road funding comes from, and to not start planning for that, I believe, is an incomplete thought process in that. And I think that there's a willingness, there's a desire to do something. I think that there is a willingness and a desire to do something on the gas tax. But I do believe that it's got to come with a more complete thought than just how do we raise money for the next couple of years.
Also, this won't surprise you. I know we have a lot of infrastructure issues here in Central Kentucky, just like everybody does across the state. But what might surprise you is we also show support for the I-69 bridge and the Brent Spence Bridge. Both of those carry an awful lot of product into our suppliers for making automobiles, et cetera, as well as the Brent Spence Bridge carries an awful lot of the nation's GDP on a daily annual basis. So those two projects somehow we're going to have to figure out how to get our hands around as well. So anyway, I think it surprises people when we advocate, maybe not so much for the Northern Kentucky Bridge, but for I-69. But if you talk to our major companies, that's an issue that it's going to make a big difference in there.
Sure, and that's one of the problems. Yeah, it's one of the problems with our a traditional response to road funding. We've seen many states that have gone to a miles driven formula where you're simply taxed on the amount of miles you drive, whether it be in a hybrid, a fully electric, or a combustion engine. You pay the number of miles that you drive, but that takes away Kentucky's competitive advantage. One of the few real competitive advantages that we have here in Kentucky is logistics. We have more miles of interstate freeway than any other state in the country, and an incredible amount of trade and commerce travels through Kentucky. It's one of our few sources of out-of-state revenue where we actually have that advantage. To go with the miles-driven formula makes it very difficult, makes it impossible to capture those out-of-state revenues. So we've got to solve that problem, but it's not an insignificant problem, but it's one that we are committed to addressing.
This is probably not fair, but I know as we're wrapping up here, I'm going to throw a couple issues in front of you just to kind of get your quick response. Do you support providing additional funding for the state's unemployment insurance trust fund, also increasing investments in education, and then the broadband incentive fund? Those funds, do you see much happening there, and do you support?
Yes. First of all, let me take UI. I think that there are two main business priorities that we just absolutely have to address in the remaining 15 days of our session. One we've already talked about, which is liability reform. The other is providing relief in the UI fund. We've got to make sure our businesses are so fragile right now. As I said, people are making decisions every day on liability. They're also making decisions on their increased UI expenses and premiums. So we included a provision in House Bill 1 that would suspend interest on the UI accounts, keep them from bumping into the next tiers. Chairman Weber is currently working on a UI bill that will provide additional relief, and we're looking at ways to continue to hold the rates stable at this point without having those escalators kick in. That it seems like it would be as simple as paying down the loan. It's much more complicated than that, because unless we pay down the full amount of the loan and start restoring the trust fund as it was, then those rates are still going to kick in. So we've got to figure out a way. And again, Chairman Weber is working diligently with the chamber, with Commerce Lex, with all the state chambers to find that method to freeze those rates. And make sure that is not an additional burden on Kentucky businesses as they're trying to keep the doors open and keep their employees employed. I think that we also have to look at the importance of finding a workable solution to the problem with processing UI claims. We still have 80,000 claims that haven't been processed, some going back as long as 11 months. That's unconscionable. I think everybody, most people, spend their entire lives hoping that they never need government, never wanting to rely on government. And the one time that government has put them in a spot in their lives where they need government to respond and respond efficiently, it's failing them. And we've got to find a solution to that continued failure. I think you saw the auditor's report last week that showed that 400,000 emails were completely and totally discarded from people that were in desperate need of UI processing, and that's unconscionable. Education funding, yes, I think that we have continued. We've seen in the two budgets that we have passed out of the House as the House majority, our desire to prioritize education funding. I also think that it's important at this point in time, though, to realize how we prioritize education funding and try to use funding to help people get back in classroom, to help schools attain that in-person instruction that we know is so incredibly vital to the learning process. It's also important that we look at remediation during summer if we can figure out a way to, and we have a bill in process that would that would establish a program for summer camps, for remediation camps, and fund those to help kids help narrow that gap that they've so desperately found themselves in lately.
And then the broadband incentive fund?
The broadband issue is, yes, we are. That's a little bit of a convoluted issue as well, as you know. We've definitely during this pandemic seen the importance of broadband and connectivity, the importance of availability and affordability, and see some huge gaps in there. There is a great desire and interest on our part as well. You've had extensive conversations with the Senate about it. The governor has put forth an initiative for it that would provide state level funding. There has just been a tremendous amount of federal funding that has come down, though, to cover that last mile for unserved areas. And I think the question is, how do we identify what is going to be solved through the federal programs that have come down, and match that with what we can do on a state level to get those last however many thousands of houses connected. It's a little bit more of a surgical approach, but absolutely a commitment on our part to make sure that we do everything we can to improve availability and affordability of broadband access.
Speaker, we could talk to you for a lot longer. We appreciate your leadership, your time with us here this morning. We know you got a full schedule, but you fit us in, and we appreciate that. And also, as you know, with Andy Johnson, during normal times when you're in person, but virtually now, anything we can do to help, please let us know. But we appreciate your support of business and the Commonwealth.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning. You have a great team working with you in Frankfort, and look forward to those times when we can be back together in person.
All right. Be safe.
Thank you.
Also, we're going to take about a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back. So freshen up your coffee, take a look at your program, and we'll see you shortly. The topic of bridges has come up in our last two segments with President Stivers and Speaker Osborne. So we wanted to get a little bit more in detail here. We have with us this morning Representative Sal Santoro. He is an excellent champion for the Brent Spence Bridge. So he's also a champion for modernizing the way we fund transportation infrastructure investments here in the Commonwealth. His district is in Boone County in northern Kentucky, and as I said, an issue very important to him that he's worked on for a number of years is the Brent Spence Bridge. So we've asked him to join us to provide us an update on legislative efforts. And then, sir, when you get done providing some of your comments, I've got some follow-up questions that we can talk about. So anyway, thank you for joining us.
Good. Thank you all for having me. Several times I've tried to get on with you all because Lexington is very, very much an important part for our state. I just want to say over the past 4 years, I've introduced legislation, and I do have one in my desk drawer, and I'm waiting for the speaker to give me the okay to drop it. I guess the snow has gotten us a little bit behind, but we still have days. And once I took chairmanship of this, I saw that there were a lot of needs in the state, and I'm going to talk real fast. I do have a bill, and it's ready to go. And the major part is it's not a tax, it's a user fee. And everyone has to understand that. I have a cell phone right here, and every month when I wake up, there's a tax on that. But this one, if you don't buy gas, you don't pay for it. But when you do buy gas, what you're paying for is better roads and bridges and safety. Everyone in the Commonwealth of Kentucky must understand we have a $500 million need. There's only one way we can do this is make some changes through the legislations. For every penny, we get $30 million. So if we go 10 cents, that's $300 million. We are still far behind on our needs and wants for the Commonwealth. Our registrations haven't been changed. So when you go and register your car, the state, there's like $11 fee. It would just increase to $22. We're just going to double that. This all goes into the road fund. And I'm going to get a little bit further along here, and then I want to get questions and answers. So we have some big major projects that have to happen in the state. You all heard about the Brent Spence Bridge. We're just a little bit north of you. That's a 1.3, $1.4 billion project. I have I-69 down the west part of the state. I have the Mountain Parkway, and I've got a couple other big projects that I'm going to call these mega projects. What these things are, it's going to take special funding. No matter what happens, the federal government is not going to drop a bundle of cash on us. I don't care what everyone thinks. It's like Santa Claus. You believe it so long, and then you're going to realize it's not there. So what we're going to have to do is get ready and do our own thing. I've been to DC. I don't think, and I'm pretty sure there will not be a new tax on federal gas tax. It hasn't happened in years. We don't want that. We want us to do ours first. I have tremendous support in the House for this. I am hoping that the Senate will realize it is time. I understand the leadership was just on. There's a need for it. And I need the governor to come out on this. I did file a resolution. I filed it that we need to fund infrastructure funding. All throughout the Commonwealth, county judges, mayors, magistrates, county city commissioners, everyone is signing on to this so that we all have the support of our local elected officials, and I need that. Without that, our legislators are not going to feel confident in voting for this. No one will be defeated on this. You can go all around our states. Every state that surrounds us has had an increase in their funding, and all the legislators were brought back because the people saw that there was a need. We have electric cars coming now, more and more in the state. There are just about 2,000 of them. There has to be a fee. They are riding on our state roads for free. There's going to be a registration fee up to $200. All these are reasonable and fair. I know that we're in the middle of a pandemic. People lost their jobs. We're going to be reasonable and fair, and that they will have good roads. Because you know what? With this snow we just have, you look at the pothole repair, what's going to happen in the next 5 years. The average person spends $400 to $500 a year on alignment, tires, wheel replacements. It's just going to get worse now that we have this major snowstorm. And I also want to talk about the hybrid cars. I've got an accelerator in there. If you have a vehicle that gets 0 to 19 miles per hour, there's just a $5 registration fee. To 20 to 24 miles per hour, it goes up to $10, 25 to 29 and 15, and above $30, it's $20 increase in fee. We are going to have the CAFE standards coming. We got to be ready to fund our roads. But I want to say one thing for our cities. In Lexington, the Fayette County urban government should be very, very happy about this. Since 1947, we had the FIST formula. Kentucky is becoming more and more of an urban state and not a federal or not a rural state. So when we get our federal money down here, we have to do matching. But anyway, the FIST formula, it was started in the 47. 2/5 of the money went to the counties, 1/5 rural counties, 1/5 to rural roads, and 1/5 to the size. Well, some of our counties were really put in jeopardy. So along with County Judge Association and magistrates, I got to say one thing, that League of Cities has really helped me on this. We came up with a new formula after $825 million. There will be a different formula. Currently, 84% of the road money goes to the counties and 16% go to the city. What I'm going to do is change that so it gets cut down. So the cities are going to get up to 35% more money. This is going to be great. It's for all our cities to have more money because they have more restrictions. Also, I want everyone to know that in my formula, there is also a multimodal fund. And what I mean is that's the way we can fund our river ports, our airplanes, airports, and also our transits with Tank, TARC, Lextran, and these rural transit authorities. They need funding. We were very fortunate what we did this past time with the Volkswagen settlement. We were able to buy some buses. We need these buses. Every bus on the road is helps us in our road needs. So I know that I really went pretty quick on this. I'm more interested in hearing from you all. I have a good plan. I need your support. I'm asking you, number one, to talk to your local legislators and also to speak to our House and Senate leadership. I want to say one thing. Represented from Lexington, they're all on board in Fayette County. Most of them are. Susan Westrom, she even sent a letter last year to the governor, and I really appreciated that this needs to be funded. So I want to just give her a shout out. She was on my committee that we go through transportation, and she was a great asset last year. So I know I rattled on pretty quick. I'd rather hear from you all what I need to fix, and please support my infrastructure funding when I hope I get to drop it next week.
Well, we've got about 4 minutes, and we're going to respect your schedule, but I'm going to go back and probably just ask or kind of button down on a few of the things that you said. But first thing I want to say is Andy Johnson once told me if there was a person who could get through modernizing transportation funding, his name was Sal Santoro. So I believe it. I had dinner with you at the Chamber event, Northern Kentucky. I will never forget that. You were one of the nicest, most gracious people for not knowing me. We had a great time. But anyway, thank you for the leadership that you provided. So when we talk about when the bill will be filed, you're waiting on the House Speaker to give you the thumbs up to drop that bill.
I am. I'm going to say one thing. I am not going to put any member in the House of Representatives to vote for this thing, and if it goes to the Senate and dies, I will not do that to our members.
Okay.
And I didn't mention that this is not a Republican bill. It is a Kentucky bill. I need the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats to stand up with me on this.
Well said. I know you touched on some different aspects, but the key components of this legislation, anything else you want to add to that? How this would be broken down again?
No, it's really, I think, like I said, as far as our cities and our people in our cities, they're going to benefit from this once we start the new formula for us. It really will. It's a great way to do it.
What do you think is the greatest challenge to the passage? I know when you started off, you said this is not a tax, this is a user fee. Is the tax word, is that the issue that's got a lot of people, anytime you talk about a tax, usually you have people who don't like that, but is that kind of the core of this?
That is. The media plays it as a tax, and it's really not. It's a user's fee, and that's what we have to really look at it. It's fair. And I'm making it fair and reasonable. I'm not doing what we really need. The Petroleum Institute, they're behind me on this, which is unbelievable. I spoke with them the other day. If you really put down what we need, they wouldn't be for it and I couldn't be for it. But this is pretty reasonable and fair.
My daughter was just up in Indiana, central Indiana, and she called me and said, "Dad, the price of gas in Indiana is so much higher." And I go, "They got pretty good roads too, don't they?" And she goes, "Well, yeah, they do." So anyway, I think there is clearly an advantage here. Last question, kind of coming back. You mentioned how the public sector has really signed on. It seems like, especially you mentioned in this area here. How about in the private sector? Are you running into the same type of enthusiasm, mixed, or is it in the rural area or the non-suburban areas? Is that where you're running into more of the challenge for this?
I got to compliment our rural legislators. They are very, very proactive on this for me.
Good.
And you have to look. We have 22 new House members. Spoke to most of them, and they're all in favor of it. So really, this is great. The private industry, they want to see better roads. I'll just mention UPS. They're all for it. I've had conversations. They said better roads. Even the big trucking companies. I just received a call the other day. They said make sure you build us good roads, better roads. It's all about moving freight and people safely.
Yeah. We are so supportive of or thankful for your time. Thank you very much. I think you articulated this very well. And Andy's right. You're the most approachable person, and you're always there to help answer the questions that we have. And you're dead honest. I mean, you never play that game of just trying to say one side. You're always very astute. So thank you very much for your time today.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Appreciate you all.
Hey, be
Thank you.
safe. Thanks.
Yes, sir.